Together Women Business Collaborative. I'm Brett Taylor, Senior Director of Programs at WBC. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with WBC CEO Gwen Young about everything that we've accomplished this year. How exciting. So to get started, WBC is an unprecedented alliance of over 80 women business organizations and hundreds of business leaders, building a movement to achieve equal position, pay, and power for all women in business. Through collaboration, advocacy, action, and accountability, we're mobilizing thousands to create momentum and accelerate the pace of change. We live our commitment to DEI, and members of our leadership, staff, board of directors, and our WBC champions include more than 34% people of color. And every one of our action initiatives has DEI goals for 2025 and 2030. Check the chat for our action initiatives through which we aim to accelerate change and join our movement at wbcollaborative.org. Each week in this series, we offer different ways to advocate change and accelerate impact by presenting data, research, and best practices, by lifting up the power of women's voices for change, and by showing the importance of cross-generational collaboration and the allyship of men in the movement. So, as we head into the end of 2023, I am excited to have the opportunity to chat with Gwen about everything that the organization has accomplished this year. When I reflect, I joined the organization in July of this year, and I continue to be struck by the powerful work that WBC does and how dedicated our community is to supporting our commitment to equal position pay and power for all women in business. And that includes our partners, our champions, our sponsors, and the dedicated team at WBC. I've been honored by the chance to meet all of our community and to get to know everyone. And I know I've only scratched the surface of the incredible WBC network. So let's set the stage. Let's get started. Gwen, our core mission, WBC's core mission, is to accelerate the advancement of all women in business and spotlight the need for gender equity, diversity, and pay equity in the workplace. So let's start. What are your observations about the state of play for women in business? What are you seeing in 2023 and in 2024?
Thank you, Brett. And I'm so excited to be here and so excited to have the audience and all of the people we work for as the unprecedented alliance, as I'm always saying, of everyone working together. And I think, me, I'm going to start with stats, right? So women are about 47% of the workforce, right? So we're not quite at 50%, despite being closer to 50% of the population. We're about 8.4% of CEOs, which is interesting, not that high. But, WBC does the monthly Women Joining Public Boards of Companies report, right? The Women Joining Boards report. And so, in the board space, what is interesting is just a couple of stats for people to think about. 493 of the Fortune 500 have at least one woman on their board, which I think is interesting, right? But women are about 30%, of all board seats, about 32, right? So we're really working to kind of really get the numbers there. And, why we exist and why we're together is that we're trying to close the gap. And the gap right now for economic parity for women is 169 years. According to the World Economic Forum, right? So that's why we're here. That's why we work together with, the partners, sponsors, and champions, as you mentioned. That's why we work through all of the resources and reports that we'll talk about, later. That's why we convene. We really want to close that gap. And so as I see the numbers shift across the workplaces, I see the conversations and headlines, even today, in the Business Newswire, talking about where are women and talking about the numbers. And seeing even companies, say, we have a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion. We have a commitment to women CEOs. We honored 10 companies this year for their commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and gender equity. And 5 of those companies are headed by women. So I think we're starting to see a shift in the landscape. I think the numbers are continually getting better. And, we're going to talk more about how we're doing that. So I think it's looking positive. But as I always say, we got some places to go, right? So we've got to always improve.
Absolutely. And I think what continues to strike me about WBC, and Gwen, you and I have had this conversation, is that, we are really focused on the systems and supporting organizations and really thinking about how we change the systems and how we alter behaviors to create this movement, to create really positive change. So I think that's, for me personally, one of the most exciting pieces of WBC. So let me ask you this. So 2023 was a year of milestones for the organization.
Mm-hmm.
You stepped
Absolutely.
into the CEO role. You started really building out the team. We've had some incredible in-person and virtual programming. And all of this is in the continued pursuit of this movement that we're building around equal position, pay, and power. So I'd love to hear from your perspective. What are some of the most exciting moments of 2023? What happened this year? And I ask, for our audience, but I also ask as someone who missed out on six months at the beginning of the year since I joined the organization in July.
Well, you joined in July, but you helped us produce our annual report. So when you look at the annual report that was released this morning, you see it by the numbers and you see the progress, right? So I think, we did 11 webinars. We did 46 of these LinkedIn Lives, which is amazing, and 24 blogs. And these showcase sort of the thought leadership. I think there's a couple really sort of critical moments in 2023 that were interesting. We as Women Business Collaborative returned to more in-person programming. And if we look at what we did on International Women's Day this year, it wasn't just that we were together in Washington, D.C. It wasn't that we had 3 or 4 panels, but we talked about issues like cybersecurity, diversity, equity, inclusion in the legal industry. So we really hit really interesting areas that businesses are thinking about as they think about risk, as they think about ESG, as they think about growing their businesses. So topic-wise, I think that was really interesting. It was great to be in person. It was great to be in person in places like Cincinnati, Nashville, the Bay Area. Really, really exciting. I think for me too, though, the resources that we have. We kicked off the year with this DEI snapshot, which analyzed 553 companies and their commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion. And we put all the information, all the data, all the stats in a place where you can see it, you can find it, and you can see that over 70% of companies have a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion. But also, we just came out with our Companies of Purpose toolkit and the Pay Parity Playbook in the past couple of months. And we've really developed, I think what's exciting for me and for, as your point, changing systems, providing, companies and organizations the tools. We've got toolkits. We've got, how do you do this? Here's some guidelines, insights into innovations that have worked. We've got Hugh of our 80 partners who's doing that. And so I think really those toolkits, looking at critical issues like pay equity, looking at corporate purpose, what I like to see, spending my life in the nonprofit sector is see that businesses are trying to care about stakeholders. They're trying to align their values, with the shareholder expectations and bring that all together. And so I think the toolkit on Companies of Purpose, the toolkit on pay equity, the DEI snapshot, all of these resources. And I want to be clear, because we talk about this a lot in the WBC, right? That when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, it's not just talent. It's how a company and an organization is using their brand, right? It's what kind of partnerships and what community engagement looks like. And that's where I think the power of the collaborative, the power of the alliance, and the power of kind of the movement we're trying to create, that focus. And so I think these resources, our ability to convene and be together is really critical. And then I always say, our Action for Impact Summit is one of the most exciting in terms of content. It's all virtual. We did 16 awardees, including the Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen. Our next one this year is kicking off January 12th with Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, who is the Director General of the World Trade Organization. That will be here in Washington, D.C. at the Reagan Building for International Trade, right? And we're going to be doing these in-person events so that, the summit's always an exciting time to see the latest issues and the latest thought leaders come together. And that gets me motivated as we're building the collaborative and the movement.
Absolutely. And I'll just say the event with Dr. Ngozi is up on our website. So I'll encourage our audience today to register for that program if you're interested in attending. But I absolutely agree with you. I think, there is just an incredible amount of resource that is coming out to sort of help move this needle and really move us forward. And I continue to be really excited every time I, as 6 months in, every time I uncover something new and incredible at WBC, it's always a really wonderful learning experience for me. So, so you talked a little bit about our first Trailblazer Award in January, but 2024 is right around the corner. What's exciting for you? What are some things that you're looking forward to at WBC?
I think a couple of things. Like I said, that I think these Trailblazer Awards and sort of doing those throughout the year, and looking at sort of women leaders and men leaders as well, because we talk a lot about sort of allyship. We have over 10% of our champion community that is men, right? So we're really working together. So I think one is kind of being able to bring these awardees from different sectors, right? I know we're focusing a lot, as you and I talk about, on kind of artificial intelligence, cybersecurity. And so I think sort of issue-wise, I'm excited about that. I'm also excited to take kind of our, one of the things that I think is critical that we do in aggregating the data and the insights is really being able to take it a step lower than it's been, or a step more detailed, if you will. So I think our Women of Color report that is going to be coming out this year, I think is going to be fantastic, because we're going to be able to look at, and not just say, white women, women of color, and have two different stats, but really look at what do those pathways look like for Indigenous women, for Asian women, for Black women, for Hispanic women. What does that look like? And so I think being able to take that kind of next level from what we already know and kind of break that out and really look at that, I think will be really interesting, because we're trying to kind of weave a movement for everybody. We always say WBC is here for all business women. So I think that's one of the exciting things. And then, again, in the Companies of Purpose program, the sponsors that participate in that, we come together twice a year in sort of closed door, Chatham House rules forums to share innovations and best practices. So we're going to do one really focused on supplier diversity. So I'm really curious, because that's such an important part of not just sort of how a company engages in its partnerships, but it's really critical for women-owned businesses. And we know that one of the things that's happening is that, the growth of women-owned businesses and sort of the growth of entrepreneurship is really being led by Black women in the past couple of years. So it's really interesting that we can kind of make those connections between sort of the growth of these businesses and then what companies are looking for in terms of supplier diversity and partnerships.
Absolutely. And I'll call back to a conversation that we had with some of our partners and sponsors and one of our board members earlier this month on allyship and how important that is, and how critical it is to really have some good conversations. But I think, for me, Gwen, everything that you said really kind of leads into what I'm most excited about, which I think is this idea that WBC has this incredible ability to have these really interesting off-the-record conversations about sort of what's going on in women, for women in business, and in business as a whole. And I personally am looking forward to working with the team and all of our partners and stakeholders to continue to have those really, really direct and vulnerable conversations. So kudos to you and the leadership of the organization for creating that space.
Well, and I think what's interesting too is you and I have talked about, I think a couple of the interesting conversations we want to have next year is what is the state of diversity, equity, and inclusion? What's the state of ESG, right? You're seeing the headlines about the risk, if you want to use the word, the backlash, what does it mean? And many companies are saying we're staying the course. And so really being able to have that conversation in a smart way, in a way that builds those relationships is really critical. So I think it's going to be a great year. Don't you think?
I'm really looking forward to it. So I always say I never want to rush the holidays or the end of the year, but I'm definitely looking forward to kicking off in 2024. So really looking forward to it. So, I think as we think about everything that we've talked about, what I'd love to talk about now, Gwen, is your call to action. What would you leave our audience with today as we end 2023, we get ready for 2024? What do you want people to be thinking about?
Well, I want people to be thinking about, of course, it sounds simple, right? I want, for those of you in the audience that aren't already a part of what we do, come and join and be a part of what we do, right? As we say, this is a community that is committed to positive change. We're committed to getting something done. We advocate, we elevate, we educate. We're there to really, what's the best practice? What's the latest? How can this be done? So join us. If you're a company and you're committed to corporate purpose, what I love about our corporate sort of community that we work with is that we don't just sit and say, here's what we do, and here's our KPIs and here's our, we talk. What's the latest things going on? What do you see coming up the right? What's the best way to engage in 2024? And when I'm watching the companies kind of build relationships amongst themselves that they may not have had before they're kind of part of this community. So one is, I think, become part of the community. The second thing is, though, is just continue every day to make sure that, in your life, in your company's life, in your organization's life, that you don't lose that commitment to diverse perspectives, right? Or that commitment to allyship. Because to me, the best decisions are made when you're having different perspectives around the table, you're hearing from everybody, but you're also being an ally, and you're being an ally. That's mentorship, that's sponsorship, that's understanding that you, Brett, may have a different experience than I have, but how can I be an ally to you to make sure that, your experience and my experience are brought together for the best solution or the best conversation as we're moving things forward. And I think that's important because, you and I have been talking about a lot over the past, couple of months. Everything feels very divisive. Everything feels a little black and white. And I think if we can look at allyship, if we can look at collaboration, if we can realize that by working together, the fact of having the dialogue, the fact of sharing how to get things done, and the fact of making a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion is incredibly important. And look around. If you're in the workplace, look around at things like get into the pay equity playbook, look at the stats and figures, and sort of ask the questions, right? Ask the questions of your coworkers, ask the questions of the places you work, your BRGs, your ERGs, right? And have those conversations about how we can all work together to fix the broken rung. That's something McKinsey Women in the Workplace talks about. A lot of women enter the workforce. By the time we're talking about C-suite on up, the numbers have changed dramatically. How do we innovate around that middle space, right? And especially as we're becoming more virtual, employers are really looking at, putting CHROs at the table in a way maybe they haven't before to talk about how do we engage our workforce, how do we work with employees. So I think, ask the questions. There's a lot out there. The time is now to have those conversations and join networks and collaboratives. And this is, we're the network of the networks, right? We've got the 80 partners. We've got the 60 sponsors. We've got the 300 men and women in the champions. And we're able to bring up these conversations or others, women in the beauty industry, women in the insurance industry. We've had a lot of conversations of women in color and retail. And I think the fact of joining the network, having those conversations, and being able to really look at the numbers through the data and resources is incredibly important. What's your call to action, Brett? What's your call to action?
I would say, first and foremost, take a look at the annual report that just got released this morning from WBC. For me, certainly I worked on it, so I have that luxury. But going back through and really reminding myself of all of the resources that are out there to think about and to consider and to implement in all the work that you're doing in your company every day, I think is incredible. And I am, Gwen hears me say this often, I'm a big believer in meaningful connections. And I think WBC helps to create that. And, I think my call to action is to continue to celebrate those differences and have those conversations that create these really meaningful dialogues around the world in which we live, particularly, from a WBC perspective for all women in business.
Absolutely. And, I said, Brett, and when you say that, I say, sort of last thing is, as we close out and we're going to wish everyone a happy holidays and all that, go to the website, read the newsletter, sign up to get the newsletter, read it on LinkedIn. Like, there are so many great things happening, but the great pieces of news that showcase not just kind of what's going on, but who's doing it and who's driving it and where people are. And it's really inspirational, I think. But come join me. We've got, the events are January 12th. We've got another webinar in January with Women in Wealth Management. There's a lot to sort of dig into and meet and engage with the people. And you see the chats in all of our events to your meaningful connections. People are chatting, people are putting their thoughts and comments in, and they're reaching out afterwards. So it's such an exciting place to be.
Excellent. Well, I think the best way that we can close out, and Gwen, I'll let you give some closing thoughts as well, as to wish our community a happy holidays. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for an incredible year. Our partners, our sponsors, our WBC champions. We could not do the work that we do without all of you. And my plug before I let Gwen close us out is, please continue to follow us on social media. We do these LinkedIn live conversations every week. And we'll start up again the first week of January without fail. So please check out what's going on and check out everything that WBC has to offer. And so Gwen, I will turn it over to you to close us out for today's conversation.
No, thank you, Brett. So first of all, thank you. I'm just so honored to work with you and the entire WBC team. So I want to thank the WBC team, of course, the WBC board. We just met 2 weeks ago to talk about the strategy. all of our partners, all of our corporate sponsors, all of the champions. And I say to you what I say every time we talk, please reach out. Let's get together. Let's talk. But everyone have a wonderful holiday season. Enjoy your friends and family and enjoy everything around you. And remember that our commitment to equal position pay and power is that we're doing this together. And we believe we're truly faster together. So have a joyous and prosperous end of the year and beginning of 2020.